Polaris National Security was founded to make sure Americans across this country understand why we need leadership abroad to keep our nation safe. Our leaders are asleep at the wheel. We never imagined how quickly it would take our leaders to turn peace through strength into war through weakness. The economic sanctions that we put in place in the Trump administration have not been enforced. In just a few short years, we've lost Afghanistan to the Taliban.
Taliban taking Kabul.
We've seen war break out across Europe for the first time in decades.
The Russian invasion has begun.
We've seen hundreds of Israelis and Americans murdered by terrorists.
Israel tonight is at war.
While some in our nation cheered them on.
We have an administration that does not take China seriously.
We won't let this continue on without a fight. Traveling across this country, we have seen just how much our fellow Americans care about national security and care for a strong America. Polaris is fighting back for an America that leads again and wins again. We're taking our next generation of leaders to see the open border for themselves. We are ready to take on 2024 and to continue to spread our message across this nation.
The communists will stop at nothing to get power.
We need to have a unifying message to be able to protect the country.
We will always stand up for America to make her that shining city on a hill. We have to take our country back.
This administration is simply not serious.
The fight is just getting started. Will you join us?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Please welcome Polaris founder and host of the Morgan Ortagus radio show on Sirius XM, Morgan Ortagus.
Ooh, got some mic issues. Hello, good afternoon, Michigan. It is so great to be with all of you. I'm so honored. Thank you to everybody who is in the room. Also want to give a big shout out to everybody who is watching this online. My name is Morgan Ortagus. I'm the founder of Polaris National Security. I was also President Trump's spokesperson at the State Department under Secretary Mike Pompeo. Massive privilege to work for President Trump and for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. So we founded Polaris National Security in 2021 so that we could have important discussions about American national security, foreign policy, and defense issues around the country. Last year, we were in New Hampshire interviewing the presidential candidates, talking about their foreign policy positions. And now in 2024, this is our second stop on what we call the America the Great Tour. We were just in Pittsburgh last week. We're in Detroit today, and very soon we'll be at the border. We'll be in Vegas. We're going to be all over the place. But I'm so honored to be here in Michigan. My husband is actually in the auto industry, so we're in Detroit a lot. Love this city, fantastic city, and such a great state. So I'm pleased to bring to you some very, very special guests, very good friends of mine. We're going to have an hour-long discussion. I am going to do most of the questions for about the first half hour or so, but then I'm going to turn it over to you, the audience. We're going to allow you to ask questions as well. So this is going to be really interactive. Again, thank you so much to everybody that is here in person. Thank you to everybody who is watching online. Now, you're going to know all of these people, but first, welcome to the stage former DHS Secretary in the Trump administration and Executive Director of AFPI, that is the America First Policy Institute, Chad Wolf. Next, somebody who is ubiquitous on Fox News, the senior senator from the state of South Carolina, Lindsey Graham. And of course, somebody who is well known to all of you, a dear friend, and somebody who's just brilliant on American national security and foreign policy, former chairman and of course former Congressman Mike Rogers. All right, gentlemen, we're going to jump right in because I don't know if you noticed, but in the Trump administration, they said that World War III would happen under us, and it appears to be happening now with the Biden team. So we have a lot to discuss as it relates to American national security and foreign policy. I'm going to start, Chairman Rogers, with an issue that you know quite well, and that is the Chinese Communist Party. When you think of the biggest threat to America, when President Trump came into office and wrote the National Security Strategy in 2017, he focused the world away from GWAT, the Global War on Terrorism, and tried to focus us towards China, towards Russia. We've seen actually President Biden's national security strategy change a few words, but similarly focused on China. With so many issues that are pervasive and so many threats from the Chinese Communist Party, what do you think is the biggest threat that they face to Americans and people here in Michigan?
Well, short answer is all of it. So the Chinese Communist Party is talking about economic dominance in the world by 2035, meaning they want to have the largest economy and the most influential economy in the world. They want to supplant the United States. Huge problem for us for a whole host of reasons. Their military is expanding at a breathtaking rate. They just came out recently and said that they've been underreporting their spending on their own military and now rivals U.S. spending on our military. And that's all a problem. The Navy is bigger, the Army is bigger in China now than the United States. They've gone after us militarily in space. They have killer satellites. They are very aggressive in cyberspace about not only just stealing intellectual property, but also doing disruptive type attacks. In Hawaii, think of this, not that long ago, they were caught trying to go in, put malware in ports, in sewer facilities, in their electric grid. And why would you do that? That's the Pacific Command. That's you cause chaos there, shut all those things down. Huge problem for the country. And so we have to look at this multifaceted, both economically, militarily, diplomatically, to start pushing back and containing China. And we need to do it sooner than the Biden administration seems willing to do.
You know, Chad, you were the head of the Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, incredibly important position. We often ask you about the border because that's what we think of for Homeland Security, but you had a crucial role in stopping the fentanyl precursors that come from China and get into Mexico, into the United States. It's now the #1 killer of young people. We just saw Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, go back to China. He was there a year ago. He went back last week. Earlier this week, I believe, actually, he got China to talk about it again, but it doesn't seem, according to the House Committee on China, this is a bipartisan committee. It doesn't appear that the Chinese government is actually doing anything to stop these fentanyl precursors. What did you do?
Yeah, I think that's right, because I think they see leadership, and they see weak leadership in President Biden and this administration, and so they're saying, well, if I don't do anything, what's the consequence of that? And we see that there's hardly any consequence. But let me just touch on what the chairman said. Look, when DHS, we issued a threat assessment in late 2020 at the end of the Trump administration. And we looked at all the threats facing the homeland, and there's quite a wide array of those threats. But at the top of that list was China, for a variety of different reasons, as the chairman said, but others as well. And so I think we need to be serious and clear-eyed about the challenge that we have. And then if you fast forward to just last year, when we had about 25,000 Chinese nationals come across that southern border, that's a 6,000% increase over 2019. And so you have to ask yourself, why is that, right? During the Cold War, we would have never allowed foreign nationals from the Soviet Union, 25 to 27,000 of them, simply walk across the border. They are our biggest adversary, and we need to be clear-eyed about that and take action accordingly. To answer your question, the fentanyl precursors almost exclusively come from China. We know this, the Biden administration knows this, the whole world knows this. They come now into Mexico. During the Trump administration, we tightened down on their ability to have those precursors come in express consignment like DHL, FedEx, and others to come into the U.S. Instead, they are now going to Mexico. The Biden administration knows this and are taking very little, if any, action.
Wow. So, Senator Graham, continuing on this China theme, we talk about it from a military perspective. Chairman Rogers hit on this. The Chinese have a bigger Navy, bigger army. We know they're not a part of any of the nuclear weapons treaties. They don't participate in arms reduction discussions. So when you look at the military-to-military comparison, they're clearly our biggest and toughest near-peer competitor. It's hard to even say near-peer competitor if they're beating us in some ways. But what concerns you most about the military threat from the PLA, the People's Liberation Army?
What concerns me most is that we've lost deterrence. The bad guys feel emboldened. Do you agree with that? All started with Afghanistan.
Sure.
Nobody sees America as somebody you don't want to screw with. Do you agree with me that when Trump was president, nobody really wanted to screw with the guy. Yeah, well, that's coming back. I know Mike. You don't want to screw with Mike. FBI agent, tough guy, but is always trying to find solutions to problems. So good question, Morgan, about China. What do they want? The first thing you got to decide when you're dealing with an adversary is what do they want? What did Hitler want? Well, everybody thought he just wanted German-speaking territory and kind of, right the wrong of the Versailles Treaty. No, he wanted to kill all the Jews. He wrote a book. Nobody believed him. Yeah. So what does the Ayatollah want? Kill all the Jews. What does Putin want? The Russian Empire back. Right? What does Al-Qaeda want? ISIS want? To kill all of us. Right? What does China want? They want to dominate the world, but I don't think they're going to blow us up tomorrow. But they're going to use military threat, economic subversion, stealing our intellectual property, and intimidate the neighbors to get their way until somebody stands up to them. They're thugs, and they're communist, and there are no rules. So how do you deal with a thug who has no rules? You make it costly, and they'll back down. We don't have a big enough Navy to deter China. We have 293 ships. Under the Biden proposal, we're going to have 294 ships in 2030. China's going to have 450. So I'm going to go talk to President Trump, and one thing I want him to do, hit the ground running, we're going to build a bigger Navy. We're going to show up, and we're going to let people know, you screw with us, you screw with our friends, you're going to pay a price. It's got to start with building a bigger Navy. And when China cheats and steal our intellectual property, when they're poisoning our kids, Trump's going to make them pay a price sooner rather than later.
Well, when we talk about the military, Chairman Rogers, first of all, I was just reading, I knew that you had a life of service to this country, but so does your wife, your daughter, your son, your whole family has been committed in service. I'm still an active Naval Reservist officer, and so we're thrilled, obviously, about your son, that he is still serving. Glad to see that your family has some class, unlike the Air Force over here with Lindsey Graham.
It's one thing to be bipartisan.
This is the Jerry
but it really hurts
moment
me to say something nice about the Navy, but we actually need the Navy. And how about this? How about a round of applause for Morgan and her team for putting this on? This stuff really matters.
I like to tease Lindsey Graham about the Air Force. He actually served 30 years in the Air Forces, active duty and reserve.
I enlisted when I was 10.
Yeah. Thank you for giving a round of applause to my team. But actually, if we could just have, if you're a veteran in the room, if you could stand up, I want to give you a round of applause. All the veterans.
Right. Here, here.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you for serving, and thank you for, especially to the spouses and the children. I know, with my own husband, I've got to go do something for the reserves tomorrow. My husband's at home with my daughter, and so for all of you two in the room who are spouses, children, you are the major support system. Thank you to all our veterans. So back to our military, 4 generations in your family serving. Thank you so much for not only your service, but for your children serving. But I do have to tell you that I am quite concerned about the state of our U.S. military, because we have a generational recruitment crisis. We're looking at post-Vietnam era levels, low levels of recruitment, retention issues. Can you diagnose for us why you think we have such recruitment problems in our military, and what can we do to fix it?
Yeah, so a couple of things. And thank you for your service. It may have been, I was an Army guy, Navy. My son's in the Navy, however. But I know, we're so confused. But my father was a tech sergeant in the Air Force, by the way, during the Korean War. Yeah. And you'll love this, my uncle was a tail gunner in a B-17 in World War II.
Wow.
And he used to tell me, he was the real deal. And he always used to say, the only time the Air Force was any good is when the Army ran it. Remember the Army Air Corps? So thank you for your service, all. Thanks for the veterans here, and thank you for continuing to serve. It's a big deal when you step away from your family like that. We have a couple of problems. One, if you look at the projection of weakness, it also, you can't help but come back and affect our U.S. Military and our readiness. And so when you talk to soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen and women who are serving, the stories that they're telling about getting what they need, about feeling like this is a service worthy of their service, is coming back a little bit negative. You can't use it as a social experiment. I want the biggest, baddest military in the world, so no one messes with us. End of story. That ought to be our bottom line and our top line, both, right? And let these young people serve in those capacities to be a deterrent for military action. That's how we've strength through peace, or peace through strength. Let me try that again. I got so excited. I was worked up about this. And you think about the next layer down. And this one, I've looked at this 100 times a Sunday. One of the problems we're having with recruits not being able to make it into the military, they can't read well enough to pass the test. Think of that. The Navy just lowered its standard down to 50% on their test. 50%. Now, I don't know about you all. My dad was, after he got out of the military, did the GI Bill, he became a teacher. If I came home with a 50% test score, I'm not sitting down for a week. Yeah, exactly, right? That ain't happening. You think about what we have just done generationally to education in this country, then the messaging about military service is bad. Oh, and by the way, you lay over top that the president is weak on a good day, President Biden. Why would you encourage your kids to go? Why would you want to go? We have to change all of that. And we need to reinstate A, patriotism, but B, on this education piece, if I may, listen, if we don't fix this, we're in trouble. If you don't read by the fourth grade, in the fourth grade, you have a 70% chance of going to prison or being on welfare. 70, right? In the state of Michigan, last year, over 80% of students could not read at grade level. This is a catastrophic failure. It's an epidemic, and it will cost us not only in the military, but economically. And what are we doing to these kids? We're sentencing them to a life that won't allow them to reach their potential. So we have a couple of ideas along the way on how to fix that. I won't go into all those details. We could be here an hour talking about a literacy crisis in America. But if we don't fix that part, you're never going to get the folks who can show up and take these tests and pass it. Again, they can't read well enough to pass the test is the number one reason. And there's a couple other ones, drugs and mental health. Here's the good news. These are all things we can work on and solve, and we will. But those are some of the biggest reasons. And again, this notion that to be patriotic is somehow a horrible thing in America, I'm not sure how we got there, but we got to change that. I did see the kids down in North Carolina campus actually protected the American
flag.
figured
it out where I come
from. That's awesome. Yeah,
everybody wants free college these days. There's a way for you to get free college. Enlist. Chad, I want to talk to you. We talk a lot about the military, but I think it's really important to talk about first responders and people who are really on the front lines of American national security, and that's our Customs and Border Patrol agents, just as important as our military. And they have been demonized. They have been demoralized over the past few years, and these are people that you worked with closely and that you oversaw as Director of Homeland Security, or as the Secretary, of Homeland Security. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the Customs and Border Patrol agents are going through, what they face literally on the front lines of our undefended border?
Yeah, so our Border Patrol agents have had a tough 3 years, right? They'll have another tough year this year as well. They didn't go to Border Patrol Academy in New Mexico for 8 weeks to do what they're doing, which is simply processing migrants into the country at a rate that we have never seen before. What they should be doing is actually keeping bad people and bad things out of the country. Doing that law enforcement mission along the border each and every day, we should be pushing as many of those agents to the line, out in the field as possible. It's about 7 out of every 10 agents are in a Border Patrol facility processing migrants today.
Wow.
Right? So you've got 3 out of every 10 that are on the line. And so there's no doubt on why you have millions of what we call gotaways that are coming across that border, are never encountered by a law enforcement official, and are in the United States to stay for an indefinite amount of time. So the crisis continues under the Biden administration. On average, over the last several months, where somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 people come across that border each and every day. 6,000 and 8,000. The Biden administration knows this. They have all the data. All this data is on their website, and yet they continue to do almost nothing about it. But they spent about 3 years. They've spent 3 years trying to convince the American people that there's no crisis there. But we've got recent polling that says that 2/3 of the people now believe that there's actually a crisis along the border. Over half believe it's the Biden administration's fault, and over half, or almost half, are supportive of not only deportations but mass deportations. Yeah. So don't let the legacy media or big tech or anyone else tell you that deporting people, removing people from the country is somehow a right-wing conspiracy, when now almost the majority of Americans actually support that, because they know that the rule of law matters, consequences matters, deterrence matters, and this ability to remove people that don't have a legal right to be here is not some harebrained idea. It's a fundamental tenet of immigration law, not only here in the United States, but anywhere else around the world. And the Biden administration, at the same time, you got historic numbers of people coming across that border. They are removing the lowest amount of individuals from this country. It's in the single-digit percentages over the last 3 years. So there's a lot of work to do in 2025 to turn this around. I think most of the Americans kind of will see the images from the border, will visit the border, and they just shake their head. And they shake their head because there's a basic sense of fairness, that what's going on there is not fair. It's not how it should be, and they want to see a change.
Well, I know that you're still in touch, Chad, with many of the Border Patrol agents, and you just let them know that we back the blue, we support our military, and we support our Customs and Border Patrol agents.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Senator Graham, we've been doing these Polaris national security events around the country for 3 years now, and I remember back in 2022, you and I were doing one of these events, and Chad, I think you were there too, in Arizona. And I remember at the time, Senator Graham, you said, you sort of warned and said that we were at risk of a terrorist attack in this country because of our undefended and open border. I remember at that event, honestly, at that event in Arizona, and 2 years ago, I thought to myself, well, that's a little hyperbolic. I kind of thought that in the back of my head. Lo and behold, the FBI director has now testified multiple times in front of Congress this year that we are, in fact, at the highest threats that he's seen, I believe, in his tenure for a terrorist attack. He calls it flashing lights, blinking lights, to paraphrase him. So you were right, unfortunately. Give us some thoughts about what you think the terrorist threat is to this country right now.
At an all-time high. Everywhere I turn, I see blinking lights. These are answers to questions I asked the FBI director months ago. Give us your evaluation of the threat matrix we face. Wherever you look, it really is high and growing. There's a perfect storm: a broken border, rise of transnational terrorism, Europe in a land war, Asia being nibbled away by China. All this is coming together at the same time. Why so many people come? I can understand everybody in the world wanting to come to America. I can't understand why we would let everybody in the world into America. I really do believe in legal immigration. This is not immigration, this is an invasion. 85% chance if you show up at the border, you never leave. They will keep coming and you change that number, right, Chad?
Absolutely.
But here's what I worry the most about. In the middle of all these people coming for different reasons, there's a group that blends in that comes for a single reason. That's to kill us. There are a lot of threats. ISIS and Al-Qaeda are not deterred by dying. That's their number one prize in their world, Mike. How do you stop a kamikaze from killing you? You hit them before they get there. Biden has shaken the resolve of all of our allies. Getting out of Afghanistan, allowing the Taliban to come back, set in motion everything. Putin goes into Ukraine. Hamas attacks Israel. Iran's attacking Israel. It all started with Afghanistan. My biggest fear, Morgan, is that there will be terrorists infiltrate our border with the capability to kill a bunch of us. We're living on borrowed time. Every day that we get through this is a lucky day in many ways. How do you fix it? You got to change policy. We got to let people know if you come to the border illegally, you're not getting into the country. We got to stand with our allies like Israel and not throw them under the bus. Let me tell you, when October the 7th wasn't about improving the lives of the Palestinian people. Count me in for that, by the way. October the 7th was about killing all the Jews. Hamas is not trying to improve the status of the Palestinians. They're trying to destroy the Jewish state. And they would come after you if they could. So that combination has created a threat level I haven't seen since I've been in politics. We have a weakened military. We have alliances that are fraying. We have enemies that are emboldened, and friends are afraid. How do you fix it? You have to change course. Why I'm in Michigan. I've known Congressman Rogers, Mike, for a very long time. We need people in Washington who get it on day one. Mike gets it. That's why I'm here.
Chad, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, let me just follow up on that. And the senator is exactly right. And all you have to do is look at the numbers. Over 360 known or suspected terrorists have been apprehended at that southern border over the last 3 years. And if you contrast that with all 4 years of the Trump administration, 16. So 16, 360, and counting. Not to mention the 70,000 what we call special interest aliens. These are individuals who may not be on a watch list that they have picked up at the border in the last 3 years, but they have travel patterns that are very similar to terrorists. They come from the Middle East or they come from Southeast Asia, but yet somehow they go to Brazil, then Ecuador, then through the Darien Gap, then through Central America, and they arrive at our border. Well, why is that? Why'd you take that route? So there's a number of concerning things here. And again, the Biden administration knows all this. There's a number of those 360 that have been released into American communities. Biden administration won't say if they know where they're at. All they say is, I'll tell you in a classified setting, right? So the answer should be, I know where everyone's at, or they're not here. But the fact that they say, well, I can talk to you in a classified setting says they're not sure where everyone's at. So it's not only what the senator's saying, obviously Director Ray and the quotes over there, but it's also just the sheer numbers of what Border Patrol is picking up as well.
Congressman.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the crime part of this as well, to add on, to jump on this. Michigan is experiencing that crime. We had a young woman killed in Grand Rapids, Ruby Garcia. We've had sexual assaults of minors by illegal immigrants. And in southeast Michigan here, we have a very high-performing, sophisticated criminal cartel gang from Chile, of all places, who are really good. They show up with jammers. They jam your, and these are all came across the border illegally. They jam your radar system. They also have capability to jam police radios. Right? These aren't a bunch of teenagers having some fun breaking into homes. These are very sophisticated actors. And what we're finding on the criminal front is the Venezuelan gangs that were released from prison, right? And in order to be in that gang, originally you had to be in prison. So that's, in the FBI we would call that a clue, that if you're coming across from Venezuela, you've probably committed a crime in your history before. They're starting to organize in places like Chicago and New York. They're having conversations with other gangs. And the drug cartel gangs operating on our southern border are becoming absolutely enriched and more powerful by the day.
That's scary.
Yeah, and they are. So they're moving fentanyl, human trafficking, guns. All of that is on the intake because there is, to Chad's point, no consequence for this.
Well, just an important point. I'll let you have it, Morgan.
No, go for it.
The Venezuelans, the Biden administration is paroling upwards to 40,000 Venezuelans into the country each and every month, and they're not even having to come across the southern border. They're actually chartering flights to fly them into the country. So Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Haiti, those 4 countries, upwards to 40,000 a month. So there's no telling how many folks are here from those countries, not only on the flights, but coming across illegally as well.
Yeah.
The Miss Riley, the young lady that was killed in Georgia, you know what I'm talking about, the college student?
Yep.
Laken Riley, yeah. So the man charged with killing her was apprehended at the border. He's originally from Venezuela. He went other places. He came in and was apprehended. He was paroled into the country because of lack of detention space in El Paso. Now, the law says you can be paroled into the country for 2 reasons. Unique humanitarian need, your mother's dying, or special benefit to the country, you're a witness in a case. During the Trump Obama years, 5,400 people were paroled into the country using that statute. Last year alone, it was 880,000 by Biden. The man who killed Miss Riley, accused of killing Miss Riley, was paroled into our country illegally. And you don't know that.
It's disgusting.
If it had been the shoe on the other foot, it'd be front page news everywhere in the world. So it's not just the problems we have, it's the media we have too.
Yeah. Chad, did you?
No, that's exactly right. It's not only the 800,000 that the senator talks about, it's not only coming across or from Central and South America, but it's also at the fall of Kabul, the Biden administration paroled upwards of about 400,000 Afghans into the country. Yeah. Not vetted. They said, we don't have time to vet you, so we'll bring you here and we'll kind of vet you once you get here. It's the same philosophy that they have with folks south of the border, right? We don't know who you are, but just come on in and we'll figure out who you are once you're here. Well, once you're here, it's too late.
Right.
We are an open society. You can move and go anywhere in this country. It's very hard to track you just by the very nature of our infrastructure. And so this idea of we're going to bring Afghans in, or we're going to bring in Nicaraguans and Venezuelans and Haitians and
Gaza.
Cubans.
People from Gaza.
Which is what we're talking about.
No.
Well,
and then figure it out. It's just, it's a backwards philosophy, and I don't understand. I just don't understand.
On the Afghanistan issue, it's also important to remember that this administration has still not given us a full accounting on how many Americans they left behind in Afghanistan and how many allies they left behind. In fact, we had an Afghan translator that I live in Nashville, Tennessee, that came to live with my colleague, and we heard about him. We knew that he had been a translator, and he told us on the plane on the way over, he was worried that the plane was going to get turned around because he looked around and said, I know these people, a lot of these people don't belong on this plane. Just to kind of make our conversation come full circle, Chairman Rogers, when we talk about the border, one of the things that's totally perplexing is the highest number or the greatest ethnicity of people coming over our southern border right now are young Chinese men. Can you help me make that make sense?
I cannot help you make that make sense. And one other thing on Afghanistan
sure,
before I
please.
answer this. So this is why this is such a huge problem. Remember when the Biden administration said, no, we talked to the Taliban, which 2 weeks prior to that was a terrorist organization. They're not going to go. They're going to treat women fairly,
right?
And they're going to help us on the anti-terrorism front in Afghanistan. Both of those things were lies.
If you believe Joe Biden knows what he's doing, you shouldn't be allowed to drive in Michigan.
So 2 things. A, they're now stoning women again, and by the way, they're denying them education past the 8th grade, and which they said they wouldn't do. And the last part of this is more important. ISIS-K, it's called, is a terrorist organization that is now reborn and reconstituted and is training in Afghanistan. So when Chad tells you that all of these people from Afghanistan are just getting let in, how in God's green earth do we know that it isn't some of these ISIS-K trained terrorisms coming here to do bad things? I don't know if we know that.
No, we don't.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And ISIS-K has a foothold in every province in Afghanistan. So, people often forget. You'll remember this, Chad. I think you spent all 4 years in the Trump administration. When President Trump came in 2017, there was a physical caliphate of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. And President Trump had to unleash the military. Mike, you know this better than anybody. He had to unleash the military to destroy the physical caliphate of ISIS, to get Baghdadi. And in just 3 short years, Biden has somehow let ISIS come back. I mean, how does that make sense?
I think that's right. And remember, one of the tenets after 9/11 was we're taking the fight to our adversaries overseas. We're not going to have that occur here in the homeland again. And so when you look at Afghanistan and you look at the lack of assets, the lack of insight of what's going on there with ISIS-K and others, the ability for them now to reach back to the homeland is at a level that we have not seen since 9/11. And that's what Director Wray and the quotes that we have over there, that's what he is talking about. It's not only what's going on the southern border. Yes, that is problematic, and that is an avenue for them to get in. But it's also a number of other terrorism-related signals that he has seen through his intelligence that he says all the lights are flashing, and we should pay attention to that. When you have government officials actually telling you the truth, we should listen and take action.
Right. So we could keep going on this conversation. I do want to, I'll let you finish up, and then we have the microphones. I promised that I would let all of you from the audience ask questions, but Chairman, please.
On the Chinese front, what we know is that the Chinese, sponsored by government entities, are walking people through, Chinese citizens, in their native language, how to get through the border, what questions to answer, and how to answer them. And the problem is, you're not going to get an honest vetting from China. So some notion that we've vetted these adult military-age Chinese males coming across the border is absolute nonsense. And here's what we know how the Chinese military intelligence services work. They use native-born Chinese citizens. They either do two things. They either co-opt them here to turn them into collection agents for intelligence, or they will send them here. And think of this, the FBI also says we open up a Chinese espionage case every 10 hours.
Wow.
A new one, right? So now you have a whole bunch of new recruits coming across the border. So even if they're not Chinese agents when they got to the border, I guarantee you they will go find them where they are to act as collectors. And one of the ways they do this, by the way, so this isn't a nice game, they will threaten their families back in China. That's how they've co-opted even folks who came here legitimately, were trying to make it in America. Chinese intelligence services threatened their families back home, like, as in death or torture or whatever, to get what they wanted to have happen. So that's happening every day. I think that's why you see all of the red lights flashing, according to the FBI.
Yeah. And look, the government of Mexico knows this, right? They almost exclusively fly into Mexico, Tijuana, and elsewhere, and then come across this border. They have the ability to stop them. President Biden has the ability to pressure them to stop them. Neither of those two things are happening.
But Chad, I am right that the Chinese males are the fastest growing group of people from other countries coming across this border?
Yes, nationality, and the majority of folks coming across that border, just so everyone's clear, are single adult males, what we call military age males, between the age of 18 and 36. Those are the majority of folks coming across that border. It's, the legacy media and the left will try to tell you it's just women and children and families coming across. Small percentage. Military age males are coming across that border in numbers we've never seen.
Okay, I am going to let you guys ask some questions. So I see a lady in the back right there with her hand.
We should have a drink cart in here after all this information.
I know.
Don't you think? My Lord.
So
a little dark.
A lot of this conversation is about the border.
Yes.
And I don't understand why everyone in Washington, D.C., in the House and the Senate, is not standing up, screaming at these people and telling them it's the border. You talk about having a strong military, and all this is about how we're going to be strong. We need to shut the border. I mean, there's political thing going on. Poor Mike Johnson goes into the room and thinks he needs to give billions of dollars to the globalist war that's going on between Russia and Ukraine. Our border is the priority now. This is infuriating to not only me, but to many people.
And what's your name, ma'am? I want to make sure we got...
My name is Dana Coyne.
Dana. Thank you, Dana, for that question. Really appreciate that. That sounds like that should go to Senator Graham.
Yeah. So let's walk through that. How many of you do more than one thing at a time? Well, that's the way politics is. If you let Putin grab Ukraine, he won't stop. If you think he stops, that's pretty naive because he's told you what he's going to do. Let Ukraine fight him rather than us. If he goes to NATO, we're in the fight. So give them the weapons we make here to help our economy to keep Putin from spreading the war where we get in it. That makes perfect sense to me. You don't have to agree with it, but I am convinced Putin won't stop. I'm convinced if the Ayatollah had a nuclear weapon, he'd use it. So I ain't going to let that happen. Now, you got Schumer running the Senate. You need 60 votes to get a bill through the Senate. You got a one-seat majority. Mike Johnson is like incredible. He's like a governing machine. You got Biden sitting at the top of it all. So you're not going to get what you want until you win elections and replace people. That's why I'm here. So if Mike Rogers goes to the United States Senate, you'll have one more vote for real border security to shut the damn thing down. You'll have a vote for a bigger Navy. You'll have a vote where Israel doesn't have to worry. Mike will have their back. You'll have a vote to allow Michigan to stay in the car business. So who governs your country matters.
Chad?
It absolutely matters. And it not only starts with the House and the Senate, but it also is a chief executive that's willing to take risk and make some hard decisions. I love the Senate. The Senate and the House doesn't need to act to secure the border today.
That's right.
The president has all the authority that he needs to solve this crisis. If you back up to 2021, the crisis didn't occur because Senator Graham and his colleagues passed a bill that threw it into, they didn't pass anything on that. The Biden administration changed policy and brought the crisis on. They have the ability to change it again. They've told the American people, we're not doing that. We have no interest in doing that. We like our strategy. They issue press releases almost daily about their strategy and how it's working. They've told the American people what they want to do, and it's time we have a new chief executive in charge.
And there's some new woman that Biden is bringing in this week for the border, I read. Oh, you don't know? Okay,
that's news to me. It doesn't matter. It's like,
Did she come here illegally?
Yeah.
No.
It's musical chairs on the Titanic. It's going to continue to sink.
Okay, good. All right. I see a woman right here down front. I'm going to try to get to everybody.
It all sounds really great.
What? We got a mic for you. What's your name, ma'am?
My name is Sue Simonson.
Hi, Sue.
And it all sounds great. We have great ideas, but how are we supposed to have a secure vote? That's what I want to know. I don't think it's going to happen.
Okay. Who wants to take that on?
I can talk about what we're trying to do here.
Yeah,
in Michigan. We have to be. This is not a campaign event, so I'm going to make that very, very clear. But there are ballot security initiatives happening in the state of Michigan that I'm aware of, and I thought President Trump had it right when he was in Michigan. He said, "Let's make it too big to rig." Right? We have to overwhelm the polls with people who show up and vote. What's happening is people are so discouraged, and I think this is by design, that they don't think they're going to show up and vote. That is an absolute mistake. We need people to show up early. The first day you can physically go and vote, which looks to be about 9 days early on average. We want people who are looking for this change, looking for a secure border, looking for a better economy to show up on the first day. And then we can use resources to bring out the other people who don't feel like they need to get there early. It's a combination of layer of things. I would suggest if you have an interest in that, you should contact I'll suggest the Republican Party on this one for a secure, how we're doing ballot integrity and ballot security, because they're going to look for volunteers to help with this, and it's going to take volunteers to do it, and then get your neighbors and friends to go out to vote. Overwhelm the voting with the people you want to send in the vote. Did I do that without getting you guys in trouble?
No,
okay, good.
I early vote in Tennessee because I'm always just nervous about the day of that I'll get sick or my daughter will get sick. So yeah, I'm an early voter. Chad, did you have something?
No, look, I think there's been a lot of election integrity efforts over the last 3 years since the last election. A lot of those are at the state level, right? So they're happening here in Michigan, but they're also happening in lots of other states. A lot of that is not publicized. You don't see it, you don't read about it, but there is a lot of efforts going on. I think the chairman's right. We can say we don't like early voting. We can say we don't like ballot harvest. We can say we don't like all of these things, but those are the rules. And so let's play by them and let's beat them at their own game. And vote early, vote often. And
that only happens in Chicago. I don't know.
And get out there and make your voice heard. I think the worst thing you can do is say, I'm disheartened. It's rigged. I'm staying home. I'm sitting out of the fight here, right? Yeah. We need everyone in the fight.
Yeah, I know you got other questions, but this is really the most important question in many ways. H.R. 1. Have you heard of H.R. 1? Mm-hmm. Okay, H.R. 1 was introduced on day one by the Democratic-controlled House when they had the House. H.R. 1 would federalize all elections. Mm. You wouldn't decide how to vote in Michigan. The Washington, D.C. would set the rules for the country. Bad idea. Trump's going to win in South Carolina. We figured out how to have an election. I hope you get it right here. H.R. 1 would do away with the requirement to have a voter ID. H.R. 1 would legitimize ballot harvesting as a tool for the entire nation. H.R. 1 would allow people to run elections from Washington who have a political agenda. Now, how does that become law? If they ever get the House and the Senate and the White House all at the same time again, they could change the rules of the Senate, do away with the filibuster. H.R. 1 could become the law of the land. D.C. and Puerto Rico will become states. The Electoral College will be abolished. They will change our country in a way that the founders would not even recognize it. Remember Kavanaugh? Do y'all remember Kavanaugh? Yeah. They tried to ruin the man's life because they wanted the seat. It was all BS. The liberals play by a different game. So here's my advice. Take Mike's advice. Make sure you have the most secure election possible, but show up like America depended on you showing up, because she does.
That's right. Cale, there is a man down here. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you. Yes, sir. I know you've had your hand raised for a while. And I'll try to get to somebody on this side of the room. Okay. Yes, sir.
Steve Perrine. I wondered if you could comment on the Biden administration's movement to move us in the direction of a digital currency and where that stands.
Good. Who wants to take it on?
I'm happy to jump in. I would be very cautious, if not outright hostile, to a digital currency run by the U.S. government. I am very, very worried about their ability to track payments. The Biden administration has already gone into your bank account down to $600. They're going to track every transaction up to $600, right? Which is just absolutely outrageous that we give the government the ability to track your expending. Digital currency, which is going to put that on steroids. I am absolutely, until they could ever show me a way that they don't control what they see and how they see it and how they can control it, I would be opposed to it. And we need to all stand up on it. This is one way the government can really own you. If they know every financial transaction that you do every single day, this is coming. And by the way, in the state of Michigan, they're this new EV mandate, which I think is a terrible idea. Unless you want to get in the extension cord business, if you want to see me afterward, I think a car extension cord from here to Toledo. What do you think? I can make $1 million. Oh, come on, people, that's funny. If you're on this, they're going to use satellites to track your car, and they're going to send you a bill every month. I mean, think about the things that they're talking about doing to our individual freedom, and I think digital currency is a big part of that, and I'd be opposed to it.
Thank you. Let's try this side of the room. I see Gabe. I see a man right here, and try to get to as many as we can.
My name is Sunny Reddy.
What is it, Sunny?
Sunny Reddy.
Hi, Sunny.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you.
My question is related to the campuses, what's going on in the country, every campus. We are very concerned about it. With the open borders, we don't know how many Taliban and Hamas are already infiltrated in the campuses. And how are we going to deal with this?
Yeah, well, I mean, these kids are stupid enough to say we are Hamas. And many of their protests, Senator Graham, what do you think about that?
Well, we're going to have a hearing, I hope, in the Judiciary Committee. Who's paying for these tents? Yeah, I want to know, don't you? Like,
they're like $500.
Do these people look like they're regularly working? No. So the bottom line is this is an organized effort by somebody. They have to travel. Somebody's going to pay for their plane flights. Somebody's paying for the tents. And Iran is the biggest winner of this. So Biden has been AWOL. Do we have any members of the Jewish faith here other than Morgan?
Other than Morgan.
I have never been more worried about my Jewish brothers and sisters in America as I am right now. I'm a Baptist. God blesses those who bless Israel. I have been taught that since I was this high. I have no animosity toward Arabs or anybody else. But the Jewish people are under a threat worldwide. Now's the time for our president to speak up and have their back. What's going on in these college campuses is outrageous. Because of your faith, you're afraid to go to school. These people are not trying to help the Palestinians. They're trying to destroy the Jewish state. Where is the money coming from? Let's get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, we saw this in the summer of 2020. with all the civil unrest, we saw all the protests, we saw very few investigations of how it was funded.
Right.
And that's what's, I assume, is going on here, is we continue to look at these images and we're saying, someone's funding all this. Like, these are college students. They're not this organized. They're not this organized and well-funded. Who's funding them? I think this is something that the Bureau should be involved in. Yep. This is about American security. So that's point one. Point two is what I'm concerned about. Look, we've known our universities have gone left and are very progressive. But now you're seeing radicalization of our youth in these university campuses to a whole nother level. It's not just liberal dogma and stuff like that. They are now taking violent actions, and we see that across the country. And so it's not, when we talk about protecting the homeland, yes, you've got to look at foreign terrorist organizations and how they infiltrate the homeland. But now you also have to be concerned about the radicalization of youth on college campuses, and I think the recent incidents just are proof of that.
That's right.
So, I just one layer up. One thing that we know Tehran is doing and has been doing and was doing up to the October 7th attack, brutal terrorist attack in Israel, was information operations, targeting college campuses here, but also they were targeting Israelis. They have a very sophisticated information operation. It used to be called PSYOPs back, in the Vietnam era and other things, where you try to get people to do something they probably wouldn't normally do. You want to try to radicalize them. You want to get them fired up. The intelligence services have been doing this for, since George Washington, candidly. But here's the difference. They can now, Tehran, can talk to our kids on these campuses. They're promising scholarships to people who get thrown out. This is unbelievable. It is really quite scary where they're going.
Maybe on cue, they're here.
They're exactly. And the second part of this, and I feel bad for the kids. Yeah, unfortunately, the police are engaged now. That's great. Think of a college senior this year. And my mother had a great saying. She said, "Your free speech ends at the end of your fist, touching in the beginning of my nose."
Yeah, that's right.
She was a wise woman, right? And she had 5 boys, and I think she corralled us pretty well.
Bless her heart.
Yeah, God, yes, absolutely. But you think about what they've gone through. The first 2 years of their school, they were told you got to stay home, hide under your bed, and don't even eat dinner with your family. Right? Think of that, right? So the first 2 years of their college was all virtual. Financial breaks? Nope, don't think so. The last 2 years, they finally get here. They're going to graduation. They're canceling graduations everywhere because terrorists are on their campuses and won't allow these graduations to peacefully happen. That's wrong. We have got to get control back of this again. I hope the FBI is investigating the finances of this. As a young FBI agent, when you're in training, they always tell you, it's not just the money, it's always the money, right? You start there, and you start pulling that thread, and we'll get back.
Yeah.
And the way they're communicating to our youth, we have to change that.
Mike, maybe we should take some of these FBI agents off the PTA, and put them in the school.
You're here.
Put them into the colleges.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something?
No,
okay, because I'm going to try. I know we've got just a few minutes left, but the man in the NASA shirt, I love NASA, and you've had your hand raised. So we're going to try to get, and if not, we'll get questions afterwards. Sorry? Yeah, let's let him ask.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about the border here today, obviously. So I'm just a little bit confused because I read the bill. We had a bipartisan bill, and it got taken off the table, I guess. So I'd like for Lindsey Graham to answer, why do you think that got taken off the table? Was it just Trump that needed a campaign issue, or did you have a problem with the bill?
Okay, my problem with the bill that was presented to the Senate was parole. It didn't make the administration go back to the 2 criteria in terms of how you release people into parole. Here's what I told them. I said, I want a cap on parole. And they wouldn't do it. I don't trust these people, do you? No. So let's put a hard cap. And they said no. Tells me everything I need to know. If you're not willing to put a cap on parole consistent with the Obama years, then maybe you really are not about controlling the border. And you asked me a question about immigration. I've been involved in bipartisan efforts to fix the problem, the Gang of 8. Here's what I will tell you. If you don't have a comprehensive solution, You got to start with your border. If they can walk across the street, this never ends, right? And when people get here, you got to make sure the bad guys can't stay. And let's come up with a system to allow people who've been here for a long time and nowhere else to go a chance to speak our language, pass an English proficiency test. That's all been destroyed, and let me tell you why. Who in their right mind would want to legalize anybody right now, given the flow? There will be no comprehensive immigration deal even talked about until you get control of your border again. So the one thing Biden has done, my friend, he's created a situation where it's impossible to get Republicans and Democrats in a room to talk about legalizing people because the border is so broken and none of us trust him to change policy.
Chad?
Yeah, I looked at that Senate bill. I was being asked for months as it was being negotiated to comment on it, and I told them time and time again I was not going to comment until I actually saw the legislative language. And when it came out, I started reading it, and every page got worse and worse and worse. The bill would not have solved the crisis. Not only no cap on parole, didn't talk about remain in Mexico. My philosophy with immigration law, which is highly complex, is go back to what works. Instead, that bill was over 400 or 500 pages of all new procedures, not tested. They had come up with in a room, hadn't asked operators, hey, is this actually going to work?
Right.
And so that's not actually trying to solve, that's coming up with a political solution to what you think the problem is. Instead of looking at H.R. 2, which was passed in the House over 9 months ago, sitting on Senator Schumer's desk in the Senate. If he wanted, border legislation or border security legislation, pick that bill up, debate it. Look, I understand they don't like it. Put it on the floor, debate it, amendments, you can improve it, you can do whatever. That's a good basis bill. Instead, they said, well, we don't like that. We don't like it because it actually solves the crisis, so we're going to come up with this random bill that none of us really know what it does. We're going to pass it, and we're going to cross our fingers and hope it does something to secure the border. And I read it as someone who helped run that agency. It would not have done what it said it did.
Okay, we have time for one more question. There's a woman down here at the front, Gabe, that's had her hand up for a while. I want to apologize. I know we can't get to every question, but we will try to huddle up with anybody afterwards. So I'm sorry that we can't get to all of them. We're already over time, but please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sarah Grocki. I'm involved heavily with Right to Life and also human trafficking organizations, but we recently for Right to Life did PAC training, Political Action Committee training, and we found, which was startling to me, it touches on what you guys were talking about, that in the last major election, over 400,000 conservative voters did not vote. And I mean, anyone who's conservative understands the whole thing with Proposal 3 and how radical it is and how it's harming women. But do you guys think that Proposal 3 and the whole abortion thing, the reversing of Roe v. Wade, and then all this very radicalization with all these tactics are to distract everybody from what's going on in the border, to get their eyes away from the border crisis and say, hey, look over here? Because even though in the Michigan State Constitution, abortion is here to stay for now, nothing we do in the next election is going to take away abortion in the state of Michigan. Yet all the ad campaigns are still pushing, and Biden himself is pushing that abortion is on the table, and it's not in Michigan. So do you think this is tactics from the Democrats and the liberals to distract the voters from realizing the major crisis is going on?
So at Polaris, we're a policy organization. We don't get involved in elections per se, but we talk about the policy behind it. And I want to thank you for what you do to help women who are victims of human trafficking. And I think that's such incredibly important work that you do. And just from a policy perspective, I'll speak. Chad and I have been to the border together several times. In fact, we're going back to the border in just a few weeks. And one of the things that was most harrowing to me about my very first trip to the border in 2022 was when we were there first, Gabe, was the stories that I heard from women just like you who work in human trafficking charities, and the women, the teenage girls, and God forbid even younger, that are trafficked at the border as a result of these policies that we all vehemently disagree with. The women, we actually heard from a human trafficking charity when we were in Texas that time at the border. We've been to both Texas and Arizona with Chad. And the charity there was telling us how there was a rape tree. And what they mean by that, in the tree, they had the cartels and these human smugglers had put the undergarments of women that they had raped, they put them in that tree as trophies. And so I just want to thank you for what you're doing to help women, to help victims of human trafficking. It is worse than it's ever been, and what's going on at our southern border is not humane. They tried to say what Chad did, what Trump did, what we did in that administration towards the border policy was somehow inhumane. I can tell you what's not humane. Things like a rape tree and teenage girls that are trafficked and raped on the way to this border. Chad?
Yeah, I agree 100% with what Morgan said. I think if you look at most polling, they will tell you that the border security issue, sometimes it's framed as immigration. It's actually not immigration. It's border security. Is either the number one or the number two issue, depends on the poll. So I think most Americans are laser focused on this issue. The Biden administration, just from their simple policies and their strategies, they have no solution to this. They know they don't. They know what to do. They can't go there politically because of their hard left is telling them they can't go there. And so they're going to talk about every other issue under the sun. We see that. We see that they're not putting forth credible solutions to bring the border under control. It's baffling to me. The majority of Americans want this to end. The president has the ability to end it tomorrow if he wanted to. He doesn't want to. So I think the issue, to answer your point, I think the issue will continue to be at the forefront for most Americans, most engaged Americans, because they know that this is not right. It's impacting. We talked a little bit about fentanyl. It's the number one killer of young Americans. 100,000 Americans are dying every year because of fentanyl and because of the Mexican cartels. And if they're not public enemy number one for this government, I don't know who should be.
So let's talk about that. What would we do to a country that attacked us and killed 100,000 people? We would respond, wouldn't we? So we have Mexico, who, for either they want to or they can't prevent it, is allowing parts of their country to be taken over by drug cartels that should be foreign terrorist organizations. So I am trying to label the major drug cartels as terrorist organizations under U.S. law to up the ante of cost of doing business. Here's what I've learned about crooks. I used to be a prosecutor. As long as you can get away with it, they'll do it. When the cost gets too high, they'll go somewhere else and do something else. You know why they're bringing so much fentanyl in? The cost is not high enough to not bring it in. You know why China is just all talk? Because we haven't made them a price to change our policy. You know why the cartels are so enriched? Nobody's going after them. I tell you this, that if President Trump wins again, and I hope he does, Mexico is going to have a hard decision to make. China's going to have a hard decision to make. Ladies and gentlemen, I know what Mike will do. Mike will be in the forefront of trying to shut these cartels down. They're killing our kids at a rate that's incredibly alarming, and nobody is paying a price. If you want to protect your children from drug cartels in China, then you need to have a president and senators and congressmen and women who will work with that president to make the bad guy pay a price they don't want to pay. Until that happens, nothing changes.
So, Chairman, you're a foreign policy expert, a national security expert. Let's give you the last word to close on, however you would like.
Well, I'm just going to follow up on that. So I worked a human trafficking case when I was a young FBI agent in Chicago. The brutality of what they do to these women is unspeakable. First of all, they get them hooked on drugs, at least, and that still happens, by the way. Or on the cartels, they don't have to get them hooked on drugs. They use brute force. We are going to have the most explosive human trafficking problem if we all get in and the executive changes and we take the control of the United States Senate and we shut the border down the day after the election. It'll be day after sworn in, let me rephrase that, because they certainly won't do it. We are going to now have to recalibrate and make sure we go after these cartels that are now operating in the United States.
Right.
They are preying on these people, and there are millions of them around the country. They will prey on these people in a way that is absolutely depraved. And so we're going to have to refocus the FBI from writing memos on why Catholics are bad, and also showing up at school board meetings to go after these fentanyl networks, to dismantle them, and go after the cartels in a way that we haven't really seen the necessary thing to do. We've gone after gang crime, we've gone after organized crime. This is a combination of both, and they're brutal, and they're violent, and they're going to, unfortunately, your services are going to be much more needed, I hate to say it, even if we're successful at closing the border. I happen to agree with Senator Graham. In the intelligence business, with that terrorism designation, there are so many other capabilities that can be brought online to dismantle it, not only here at home, the organizations, but all the way back to the Chinese border. We have unique capabilities to do this in a way that doesn't engage, it's not talking about military conflict. We are talking about dismantling these folks like we did with Al-Qaeda, with ISIS, with other ones around the world. If we don't do that, we will lose the sovereignty of this country over time. We cannot do it. We have to get at this. That's why this election is so consequential.
Well, I want to thank all of you for coming today. I want to thank everybody who's watching online as well. Thank you to the veterans in this room and their family. Thank you to the law enforcement that I see in the room as well. We back the blue. And thank you to my panelists. Thank you, Senator Graham, Chad Wolf, for coming all the way to Michigan. We are more than happy and proud and honored at Polaris National Security to bring you these national security discussions around the country with many more to come. Thank you, Chairman, for having us in Michigan. Thank you, and God bless America.
Thanks. And by the way, this counts as a border visit. Right across the way is Canada. This counts.
That's a good point.
Myrtle
Thank
Beach
you.
is waiting on all of you. Come.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Tumble out of bed and